I'm going to say a phrase, and I want you to tell me something about that phrase. If you like, you can comment it down below, or just think it to yourself. Okay, here we go. Cozy game. You thought about it? Did something pop into your head? What is interesting to me about that idea is I can generally say something like cozy game and it will invoke things in the person that I am saying it to. Me and you may not get the same two answers as another two people, but when I say cozy game, one might find themselves reaching out for games that fit a certain aesthetic. For myself, Golf Club Wasteland is a cozy game, but what I am trying to establish here is the idea of a game that establishes an aesthetic, an experience, more so than simply gameplay. Golf Club Wasteland is definitely a game that is trying to build an aesthetic, and it's for that reason that I believe Golf Club Wasteland is a fantastic game. Let's back up a little and look at the barren, empty, pink moss-covered details of Golf Club Wasteland first. In the future, environmental collapse has rendered the Earth uninhabitable by humans. The rich have fled to Mars and set up a new colony called Tesla City, where humanity continues its days. The rich are able to take shuttles back to Earth, so they may play golf in the wasteland ruins of Earth while safe in their hazmat suits. And while they do this, they listen to the relaxed programming of Radio Nostalgia from Mars, a radio station dedicated to reminiscing about the good old days of Earth by playing old music and sharing some stories of the times before running away from their problems to Mars. This is a wonderful picture to paint. The backdrop is truly bleak, and it is what drew me to the game in the first place. The rich have ruined Earth, used their money to flee, and now return to Earth purely for recreation. As you play through the game, it continues to weave colour into the world of ruined Earth, depicting just how horrible the escape to Mars truly was. Not going to lie, I was here for some truly bleak stuff, and it delivered. Throughout the game, you will play 35 holes of golf across a variety of different dilapidated Earth terrain. You will visit various buildings like a nightclub, a shopping mall, and a toy factory, and engage in various golf challenges like the usual stroke-related interactions, but also platforming challenges, timing challenges, picking which way forward to complete holes, and avoiding various hazards that only a golf course made of a decaying city could present. You control power and angle of a swing, and that's it. Move the left stick to adjust the power and angle, tap a button to swing. All you need to do is get the ball in the hole. If you watch the trailer for the game, it may also seem like you'll be flying your little jetpack hazmat guy around to go and get the ball. I'm sad to say that this isn't the case. Once a stroke is played, the camera will follow the ball, and once it comes to rest, the game will fly the player's character over to the ball where the player can take their next shot. You won't be controlling the character between shots. There are some novelty obstacles and some shortcuts throughout the level. These pipes are sometimes scattered around the level, and hitting into one end will transport the ball down the pipe and into a different area of the map. There are glass panels, rogue automatic doors, acid pools, squirrels, and a plethora of other things to screw up your stroke counts. The layout of all these different hazards, shortcuts, and general play areas result in later levels often having many ways to complete one hole, including taking shortcuts, utilizing terrain for advantages, the slow and steady platform way, etc. For the player to take these different ways, they will need to balance their appetite for risk and reward, unlike the former inhabitants of Earth. Taking the short path will often mean a difficult shot with less margin for success, surrounded by a lost stroke penalty. And now a hypothetical person would ask me for the purpose of this script, so it's basically a golf game except the holes are novelty holes built out of the ruins of Earth. Well, yeah. Except I haven't told you about the best bit yet. While playing through the holes, you'll be treated to maybe an hour or two of Radio Nostalgia from Mars. This is a radio show that has been produced for the game that will be playing in the background while you are golfing. And it plays out literally as a radio show.
Yeah, to all you Martians out there, welcome to another edition of Radio Nostalgia from Mars. Plenty of great stuff coming your way onto Soul's show. You know, bit of that old Terran flavor, some more stories from our beloved callers, and news and views from around our base out here among the stars.
This is utterly delightful. I highly recommend turning down the game's sound effects volume a little bit and bringing the radio a little further forward, because this is the star of the show, well, game. It's a show within the game, but the show is the star of the show, which is a game. There, easy. There is music that makes up the game soundtrack. There's little ads for the corporate sponsors. There's stories from callers about their times back on Earth. My favourite parts are the public service announcements that are intertwined between the regular programming, where the radio host will try to segue into a public service announcement that lets the citizens of Mars know about things going on in the new colony while still holding the show together.
Speaking of requests, please follow Habitat protocols for sanitation. No liquids other than bodily in the main bin, including pee. Some of you don't like it, but all water is recycled, so pee into the funnel installed next to your toilet, please. It's
genuinely delightful to listen to, and a really well-written addition to the game in a format that you rarely see these days outside of GTA-style games with car radios. This radio program also contributes so much to the atmosphere and the world building of the game. People tell stories of old Earth, of the escape, of their lives living on Mars, all while you golf casually across the ruins of Earth. And it is this world building that adds richness to the story that unfolds as you play the game. The story isn't anything too crazy, but it does centre around a personal tale of one of the colonists who has now returned to Earth. I won't go any further into it than that because the game is pretty short, maybe a few hours depending on which play mode you choose, so going into any more detail might ruin some pacing beats in an already short game. Along with the radio, the story is told through the level text, getting diary entries by finishing levels, and also finishing levels under the stroke limit. Once you finish the game, you get access to part of the story in the form of, I guess it's a comic sequence. Now, look you, listen to me. Remember when we talked about cozy games at the start of the video, and I talked about how that's an aesthetic? Well, I want to return to that now. If you look at the things that I just mentioned, standard if not simple golf mechanics, 35 holes, maybe a few hours of playtime, radio to listen to, futuristic setting, you may think that there isn't much to really set this one apart. But this game is probably one of the best examples of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Golf Club Wasteland builds one of the strongest experiences I have played in a while. It makes you feel like Spider-Man.
Our unique soundtrack in the form of a radio show that will help you to truly feel like the 1%.
The radio is expertly written and produced to wonderfully expand the bleak nature of the world as the player makes their way through the game, building and communicating the situation on Mars and letting the player see inside the narrow-minded irony of the nostalgic rich who left the world they ruined. The whole starts simple and build in length and complexity, but the simple controls keep the game light and not too serious. The artwork blends the teals and pinks and blues of strong color direction to build both a beautifully stunning world, but also an interesting one that tells its own story of abandonment and destruction. Sitting down with some headphones, popping on Golf Club Wasteland and listening to Radio Nostalgia from Mars evokes that warm feeling of putting on a good podcast from creators you love while perfectly balancing the dark nature of the story and setting. Now, with that said, I am way too critical of everything in my life, and it's a massive problem that, unlike the rich in Golf Club Wasteland, I can't just build a rocket and escape or drug myself out of that problem. So let's go over a few little rough parts of the game. The first little number here is often being quite frustrated with the way you generally hit the ball. I believe the controls to take a swing are deliberately kept minimalistic and ambiguous, likely to avoid players just memorizing or optimizing out all of the challenge. You judge the power by the length of the arrow. If you wanted to be a bit more specific, you could use the amount of these dotted lines to try to maintain some consistency. Angle is purely done with eyesight. This means that every stroke is somewhat of a guess. Power is also non-linear, making it more difficult to judge shots and even to putt from a small distance away if you are laying up or going for the hole. This ambiguity makes it really hard to replicate what is going to happen or incrementally make a shot better. You might find yourself on a rooftop hitting down and making the same shot over and over because it's too hard to tell what the previous shot was to make any adjustments so the next shot can be different. I found myself defaulting to using full power shots whenever it was feasible, rather than a more appropriate shot of a lower power just because I could never really judge how much carry a shot would have. This would include bouncing the full power shots off the roof, for example, rather than just chipping forward. Full power was the devil that I knew, so I stuck with it to remove one variable from the equation. You do, over time, get a feel to a certain degree of what shots will do. But the game is too short to really build up that muscle memory, so I found myself never feeling confident to make any truly precise shots that weren't full power. That was control ambiguities. This next one is the problems they cause. Control ambiguities create problems that seep into the other areas of the gameplay. There are buttons on some walls, and it's difficult to hit them with any precision because of how ambiguous the stroke information is. Similarly, it's difficult to putt correctly because of the stroke controls. When putting along the ground, you can't see the power dashes, so you can't judge power. Since the ball is rolling, there is also the difficulty of factoring in ground fiction too. So once again, we're kind of just guessing. This makes accurately taking short shots really difficult. To a different tune, there's also only one save file, despite being a local-only game. I firmly believe that this is a cardinal sin for any game that isn't using an online account to track data. I just don't see any reason the player should have to delete all their progress to play through their campaign or the story mode again, which is the case here. This is a good point to hear from the game's corporate sponsor, difficulty. The game actually has 3 gameplay modes: story mode, challenge mode, and iron mode. Story mode is infinite shots. You just have fun and enjoy the world building and the story. Challenge mode applies a stroke limit to each hole. Go over the stroke limit and the ball will self-destruct, sending you back to the start of that hole. This is where the hazards and the ambiguous controls can really take a toll. You might take 3 or 4 strokes at a time trying to lay up enough to continue or trying to land perfectly on a platform surrounded by a hazard. Finally, iron mode. This is crazy. 1 ball, stroke limits. If you hit a hazard or if you go over the stroke limit, the ball self-destructs and you have to restart the entire game from hole 1. That's far too metal for my soft fleshy body. Coming back to the save files though, changing to story mode from challenge or iron mode will prevent you from going back to do either of those modes. You will restart the game again from the start. You also can't switch to iron mode from challenge mode without restarting the game and wiping progress. Why? That makes no sense. What if I previously finished the game and I just want to casually play some holes? So I have to choose between never having a stroke limit again and going into story mode, or always having a stroke limit. Just like, wow, like I don't understand this decision at all. Speaking of deleting progress, there are some annoying little UI UX quirks that the game could also do away with. Like, to restart a hole, you need to press the menu button, wait for this animation, then hit right twice to go past the arrow onto restart's level, and then select restart level. Okay, maybe you want to discourage restarting, but why isn't restart selected automatically? Or even just put it on a button hold while the gameplay is happening. Along these same lines, while the art is striking, there really could be some work done to help separate the foreground from the background and the play space from the decorations. There are parts where the art blends together, and for example, you might be hitting onto a surface that is actually behind the play space, so the ball will keep falling into water that you didn't realize was there because you thought you were hitting onto a flat surface. Anyway, that's my little rant. Most of these problems likely come down to the game being a fairly small production. The game is pretty short, so you aren't dealing with them for hours on end. They're mild frustrations through a short and delightful experience, and you can easily endure them. So we have covered the good stuff and the frustrating stuff. I really want to go back to that idea of aesthetics to wrap this one up. Golf Club Wasteland is a great game because it creates a very specific and immersive experience. The way the art, the sound, the radio, the story, the setting tell this story of the rich golfing across Mars, and it ties to the main character, is just superb. You will be transported away, you will be locked in, and you might even want to open up a nice tube of OMAS while you listen to the stylings of Radio Nostalgia from Mars. I can see this being a game that is chill and approachable enough for someone who wants to snuggle in on a rainy day. who has a flight ahead of them and just wants to be transported away from being cramped in a flying tin can. Someone who just resonates with the bleak subject matter, taking a load off after a long day and chilling out, listening to some radio and sinking some balls. Anyone who appreciates a nice chill escape game really. It would also be an excellent game for anyone who isn't a hardcore gamer, or if you wanted to introduce someone to gaming in a casual, fun way. It's truly delightful, and I highly recommend it. Well done to the team. I have a range of other reviews available. There's a playlist on the screen right now. Bell, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.